What's going on, everybody? It's Achilles LBT coming at you with a brand new video, and in today's video I finally get my chance to come through with my personal build video for a healing variant of Kharazim. And basically, just to get this thing moving, we're going to go through his abilities, obviously, which, depending on how much you've been watching from last week all the way up until now, maybe you're already familiar with, but just in case anybody's new to the channel or new to this hero in general, we'll still go over them anyway. So we'll start off with his Q, which is Radiant Dash. It helps you jump to an ally or an enemy. Obviously, if you jump into an enemy, you do a little bit of damage, but this is basically how Kharazim gets the bulk of his movement, his mobility, and this is exactly because he's a close range character. He's a melee support. His healing is also like close range, so this is basically what you want to use to kind of be a gap closer towards teammates every bit as much as, you know, enemies. I kind of feel like, depending on if you're going for a healing or a damage-based variant of Kharazim, that should pretty much dictate what you're using your Radiant Dash on more. Like, if you're using him for a healer, you're going to be leaning more towards saving your charges for dash, because it only has 2 charges, but you're going to be leaning more towards using these dashes to get to teammates as opposed to doing damage. I mean, at least from the way I play, that's basically how I use them. I do not use my dashes at all on enemies, and I basically save them for emergency situations to get to my teammates, or to get out of a zombie wall or something like that. Like, it's just basically like emergency mobility. So moving on to his base healing ability, Breath of Heaven. It heals nearby allies and grants movement speed. It heals nearby heroes for 108 health and gives them 10% movement speed for 3 seconds. Now, the thing about this ability is that no matter which variant, no matter which way you go with it, you're going to have this ability to heal, yes. But depending on how you build your talents, this becomes a way better ability than it seems at first, because early on in the game, you're not going to be doing a ton of healing with this ability alone necessarily, but it does get extremely bursty, preferably through the build that I'm going for, that I'm going to be going through in this video. This ability becomes extremely bursty on the healing front. It actually does hold its weight right up there with a lot of the other healers in the game. I mean, my first game that I played with Kharazim, like my very first game, I believe we lost the game, but I still finished with 97,000 healing, and it was just like a clear-cut indicator that Kharazim can definitely hold his own as a lone healer on the team if you so choose to build towards that. And obviously, if you keep your teammates in mind the whole way, like, you have to be on top of it. And the thing about Breath of Heaven is that it does, if you build it up a certain way, it does allow you to actually almost seem like you're healing from a distance. I mean, you can only use this at close range, but if you use it a certain kind of way, it almost seems like you're doing the same thing as a range healer. So it's just something that it depends on your build. You're gonna really see how much you get out of this. His third ability is Deadly Reach, which increases his attack speed and his attack range. And this is another one, like everything I just said about Breath of Heaven. I feel like if you go for a damage build, that Deadly Reach is almost the same exact story. If you're going for a damage build, if you're going for a healing build, this ability is still nice. Like, the speed boost that you get is really nice. The range is all right. Like, it's not something that's incredibly noticeable, but the speed boost is definitely noticeable regardless of what kind of variant you're going for. And the upside to Deadly Reach is that it still tacks on whatever your trait is, whichever trait you choose to go with. You can still, like, get at least 2 charges out of it using Deadly Reach. Like, and you'll understand what I mean later. But obviously, we can skip over his trait for now, because that's what you pick at level 1 of the talent build. So, moving on to his ultimate, 7-sided strikes. He becomes invulnerable and strikes nearby heroes. You become invulnerable and strike 7 times over 2 seconds. Each strike hits the highest health nearby hero for 7% of their maximum health. Now, one thing that I really like about 7-sided strike, for one, is its cooldown is only 50 seconds. That's virtually nothing, really. 2, it gives Kharazim a clear-cut out. If you use this on one hero as opposed to a bunch, this thing does major percentage of damage. Like, this thing can burst down damn near any hero, depending on like your timing and stuff like that, and your placement. Because the one thing that they did to make Seven Sided Strike fair is that wherever you place it, that's where it stays. It's not a thing. It's not the kind of ability where if you place it on like where an enemy's standing, even if he runs out of your radius, out of the circle radius of the ability, you're not going to continue to hit him. If he runs out of the area of effect that you place it on, he's safe. So that is one thing that they did to make it fair. The other thing, obviously, is if a team is coordinated a certain way, this ability is it pretty much nerfs itself if you use it on multiple targets. Like on one target, it's really really nice, but on multiple targets, not so much. It has the reverse effect. So that's just something to keep in mind if you're going for a damage build. If you're going for seven sided strike, it's just something to keep in mind. It's something you definitely want to be careful with your placement for one. And two, you want to use it on isolated heroes as opposed to big group heroes. So moving on to Divine Palm, which again, this is going for a healing build in specific. This is definitely the heroic that you want to go for if you're going for a healing variant. And it basically prevents an ally from death. It protects an allied hero from death, causing them to be healed for 500 if they take fatal damage in the next 3 seconds. Now, basically, again, one thing I do like about this ability, well, I mean, as a healing ability, 60-second cooldowns isn't the best, but it's still not horrible. And depending on how you build up the talents, you can change that cooldown to down to 5 seconds if you choose to go that route at level 20. But they really wouldn't have done themselves any favor because you often see Divine Palm getting compared to Ancestral Healing on Rhaegar. But they wouldn't have been doing themselves any favor if they made the abilities exactly the same, because essentially Divine Palm does work exactly the same as Ancestral Healing, but obviously the kicker is that the enemy that you cast this on, or the friendly that you cast this on, has to essentially die. Like, it doesn't do anything. This doesn't heal your allies at all, or yourself, because you can cast this on yourself. This doesn't do anything if you don't die. So basically, the onus is on whoever gets the Divine Palm. The onus is on them to actually get even more aggressive, even if they have virtually no health. If they're palmed, they get a ton of that health back. And in the late game, it almost feels like you get all of it back. You definitely don't get all of the health back, but it almost feels like it, like you do, like with the amount that you get back. And essentially, like, yes, this is the kind of ability that works better when you're actually you have a pre-made going into a game, or you like actually can talk to your teammates. But it's still, the onus has to be on the person who has this ability casted on them. They have to have the awareness to see that, and that's kind of the downside about Divine Palm. You are going to go through your times where you put this on somebody who's about to die and they don't really acknowledge it and they still run away, and then like basically it's a wasted heroic, because again, it only kicks in if the player is aggressive and essentially dies, and it's only for 3 seconds. Now, getting into one way to kind of counter that goes into level 20, which is actually the route that I go, but we'll get into that with the talent build. So moving along to the talent build, this is what I was talking about. This is where you can actually select his traits, where Transcendence, every third basic attack heals an allied hero for 40, or the lowest nearby allied hero for 40. And that's basically how all of these traits work. The third basic attack, depending on what you pick from these three, the third basic attack has an effect on either your allies, yourself, or your enemy. So this would be the ability that has the effect on your allies. This is like a healing variant that affects your allies, but this is actually not the route that I go with my build. Yes, it does heal teammates. Yes, it absolutely does. Yes, you can actually pick this if you want, but for my personal build, I never pick this ability, and I'll get into that when I get into the third trait that I actually pick. Iron Fist, this is the one go-to if you want to build for a damage variant. Every third basic attack deals 100% bonus damage. It's basically like double damage. So again, this trait combined with the E ability, Deadly Reach, that's probably like it's really monstrous if you can time it right and if you could actually land your shots, because there's no essentially no lock on. It's like anybody who plays this game knows that with melee characters, there's no lock on. So if somebody's getting hit and they don't like it, they could easily just walk away, and that could just break away like whatever combos you're running with this. So that's just something to be mindful of if you're going for a damage variant. But for my healing variant, I actually tend to go with Insight, which basic attacks restore mana. Every third basic attack restores 12 mana, and this is actually going to be something that you'll notice is a problem with Kharazim in the early game only. That he does kind of burn through his mana quite a bit because, as I mentioned, his healing ability, his Breath of Heaven, does not heal particularly well in the early game, so you're going to be casting it a lot more often than you will be in the late game. It actually kind of works both ways because in the early game, the healing ability is it's not tremendous, it's not great, so you're going to be blowing through mana a lot more often. Because it's weak. But then when the ability is strong, you're actually going to have a ton of mana anyway. Like, you're not going to be blowing through your mana because your mana bar is going to be so much better. Combined with Insight, like you have to stay busy as far as like attacking and stuff like that. And again, like I mentioned before, with the Deadly Reach, that gives you 2 free charges basically of whatever your trade is. So you're getting back 24 mana every single time you use Deadly Reach, which is a plus. Like that can only be viewed as a plus. So this is basically what keeps you in the game, because you'll find that if you play a certain way, it's really not that hard to actually keep Kharazim like in the game, like keep him in the fight. And like this actually would be like his really his weak point, which would be like his mana early on. And this trait goes a long way towards helping to kind of like make that process a little easier. And it does, like, I think all of 3 of these traits still maintain their presence from the early game all the way through to the late game. So moving on to level 4, again, since we're going for a healing build, I will just address the healing talents only, because Kharazim is a rare character where he has different talent options at every single level that are geared towards either making him a damage variant, a healing variant, or a hybrid. So I actually don't think that there's very many bad talents on this hero, but since I'm going for a healing variant, I won't be addressing all of the damage selections necessarily, because I have a clear-cut focus on what I like to pick, and it does get results. So at level 4, you have a slight bit of flexibility here, depending on if you want to have a little bit of a helping hand with healing, or if you think you're better off just putting a shield on one hero. It's really up to you, but for my build, I tend to go with Healing Ward, because it is something that you could place down to actually do, like I said, it's like a helping hand that could keep people in the fight. It keeps the whole team, like, as long as they're standing in it. This is something that it's not game changing at all, but it's something that does kind of help give you that extra little push. Like if you're dealing with a boss, or if there's like a team fight going on, you leave this like kind of like placed in the back where the enemy team can't really reach it, and you'd be surprised at how like the little nudges of health that keep pumping out. You'd be surprised at how handy that could be sometimes, combined with your personal like healing abilities and stuff like that. This comes in handy. So at level 4, you're gonna be picking a Healing Ward. Level 7, this is finally where the W ability, the Breath of Heaven, starts to go from being a little subpar to actually really good. Because, and again, this is another one. I'm going to go with the talent that I pick, but then make a little sidebar mention of another talent that you could pick that will still work just as good. But understand that if you go a different route, the W ability does not function the same exact way as if you would pick Echo of Heaven. So Echo of Heaven basically lets Breath of Heaven heal a second time on its own, which is something that I kind of like. It's not something where you have to press W twice. It heals on its own 2 seconds after you cast your original, and it heals for only 50%, so it is still fair. But at the end of the day, it makes Breath of Heaven a lot stronger right at level 7. And again, you don't just heal twice, but you also get that movement speed twice. And factoring in the later talent picks that I'm going to be making on this build, this actually becomes one of the biggest talents you pick on this build. Now, I mentioned that I was going to sidebar a little bit here on a second option that you could pick, which would be Cleanse, which I actually think that I have no problem with this talent whatsoever. I think it's one of the best talents. Even with the rework that they did, I still think that it's one of the best talents you could pick as a support character. But again, you have to understand that if you're going to pick Cleanse, you basically throw the the extra viability of Breath of Heaven right out the window. Now, I'm going to come back to this later on because there's something else to bring up with. There is one more upside to picking Cleanse, but it's not really noticeable yet at this point. So at level 10, already went over Divine Palm. It's definitely the way you want to go if you're going for a healing build. Even I don't advise, if you're going for a healing build, I don't advise, because I see sometimes people still pick a 7-sided strike when they're going for a healing variant. I definitely don't advise that, because when things get tense, like in the late game and everybody gets extra bursty, having an ability to bring somebody right back into the fight that the enemy team like wastes all of their abilities on to kill can be game changing. So I definitely don't advise like veering off of that path. Divine Palm is a great heroic. It's just really comes down to the teammates you're playing with that lets you that dictates whether or not you get the full value out of this heroic. So at level 13 is kind of a weird, in my opinion, it's kind of a weird talent level for a healing build, because a lot of these talents really seem geared towards like either playing defense or going for damage. And I mean, by default, I find myself picking Relentless because it reduces the duration of silences, stuns, slows, and roots against you by 50%. Like, it cuts it in half. And I feel like if I don't have to worry as much about all of those crowd control elements, then that leaves me more time to be out there as a healer. Like, it gives me more of an opening to do my job, and that alone is something that just has me like going towards this. And what I actually do see people picking, regardless of which way they go, is Quicksilver, which gives you a Radiant Dash. Like, it adds a movement speed. As far as like if you jump to an ally, you get movement speed off of that, which is nice. I actually don't think that's a bad idea. If you're more comfortable with this as opposed to Relentless, go for it. The reason why I don't pick it though is because I already get a movement speed off of my W. Like, whenever I Radiant Dash to a teammate and I heal them, they immediately have movement speed. So I don't necessarily like feel the need to use another talent pick to essentially do more of what I'm already doing. But that's just my way of going about it. There's absolutely nothing wrong with picking Quicksilver. If you feel more comfortable with it, go with it. So at level 16, this is where we have a talent level to make up for where I said 13 had a lack of options for healers. This 16 completely makes up for it. And for my build, I go with Soothing Breeze, which basically acts as, and I said I was going to go back to talent level 7 in a later portion of the build, and this is what I'm talking about, because this basically gives Breath of Heaven all of the same upsides of a cleanse. Like, it removes silences, blinds, slows, and roots. It basically acts the same way as cleanse, but without the active ability. Like, it's already attached to your basic healing ability, so it's like you get the same benefits of cleanse without having cleanse. Now, this is a big reason why I actually go with Echo of Heaven instead, because that gives me my opening to boost up my healing ability. And this is exactly, again, like I mentioned, Echo of Heaven is what makes your healing ability, your base healing ability, a lot more viable. This is what puts you on par with some of the top healers in the game. In my opinion, it's the fact that you get that second heal afterwards, that it just changes everything for you. And again, when you combine that with the fact that it gives you a movement speed boost, and then you add the cleanse like addition, you add cleanse to it basically with Soothing Breeze, it just becomes that much more of a viable like healing talent. Now, I do actually see people sometimes picking Circle of Life because this increases the healing by 10% for each hero that's around you when you cast it, which is also good. Like, if you combine that with Echo of Heaven, that's something that could actually push your teammates back to, I'd imagine if you're in a crowd, that might be good enough to push them closer to full health, like on just one burst. So I don't see anything wrong with this, but for my mind, I don't see how you can go an entire build like without having some form of a cleanse. And again, even if you don't want to choose Echo of Heaven, if you have a basic version, if you have the version of cleanse and you double up with Soothing Breeze, that means you have a means to get everybody out of everything, possibly at one time. which is nuts. Now, technically, you can still do that without having cleanse. If you just like go in the middle of the group and you only have this, you can still get everybody out in one shot. But if you want to be extra safe about it, I don't think there's anything wrong with having both cleanse and soothing breeze. So, me personally, for your money's worth, I think it's a better way to go to boost up the healing the healing viability of your W at 7, and then at 16 you basically add even more viability to it by giving it cleanse like abilities, you know. So I think it's just a nice little 1-2 tandem. Again, you don't get it until like the late game at 16, but it comes in so handy at that point that it's you can kind of forgive the fact that you don't have it until then. It looms large. Like, honestly, like, I would not oversell this. It is such a good talent to have, and again, it's a way to have cleanse without using up an active ability for it. So at level 20, I actually feel like level 20 is another one that's heavily favored towards support, and because really the only I feel like, well, Epiphany can technically be like an offensive ability too, but for my money's worth on my build, I actually still go with peaceful. I go with peaceful repose because this is actually what kind of gives you a little bit of forgiveness if you cast this. Remember, I said the thing about Divine Palm is that when you cast it on a teammate, your teammate has to be aggressive. Now that doesn't change at level 20 when you pick this. What changes is if your teammate doesn't die, instead of having to wait 60 seconds to cast it again, you're only waiting 5 seconds, which makes it a lot more forgivable. If they don't die, like, it's not so bad, it's not the end of the world. You could actually like cast this a lot more often because essentially you don't have to worry about a 60-second cooldown ever again. Like, if they don't die, it's 5 seconds. Like the only time you'd have to worry about a 60-second cooldown is if you use the ability and your teammate actually dies. That's it. So it just gives you that much more openings to use this ability. And technically it could also be used as a way to practice using the ability altogether, because using Divine Palm isn't easy. It's not. Like, this is just like every other ability on Kharazim. You have to be up close. Like, you can't cast this from a distance, which is another advantage that Rhaegar has with Ancestral Healing, is that he can cast that from a little further, you know? Like, he doesn't have to be directly on a teammate, and the healing happens no matter what. Like, he doesn't need teammates to die for it to work. His is the opposite. Like, his teammates have to be alive for it to work. Where Kharazim, they have to die. So, again, factoring all that in, this is the type of talent build from top to bottom that will get you serious results if you actually keep your attention towards keeping your teammates alive and in the fight. You can't get caught up because it's easy, because Kharazim is a really fun character. It's easy to get caught up doing the damage thing. Even if you build for heals, you might get caught up trying to fight people more than you should and not keeping your teammates in the fight. And it's something like, just because Kharazim has some good offense about him, it doesn't mean that he's special in the sense that, you know, you have to pay less attention to doing your job as you would with another healer, you know? You still have to pay attention to your teammates first and foremost, keep them in the fight, keep them alive, and then you'll see the result in this build. Like I said, the first time I used it, I had 96,000 heals. Like, I think the highest I've ever gotten with Kharazim was like 109,000. And that was also in a loss, which was so fucking weird. But to briefly run down the talent in the first half of this video, at level 1, you're going to be picking Insight to get back mana on every third basic attack. Level 4, you're going to be using Healing Ward just as a helping hand. Like I said, it's not something that's going to be crazy, but you're going to have it like for the rest of the game. Like, in case you're on a cooldown for heals and you need to give everybody a little bit of a nudge to keep them in the fight, Healing Ward is there for you to do that. Level 7 is when you add the extra viability to your basic healing your healing ability with Echo of Heaven. It basically gives you 2 charges of your heal, but the second charge only hits for half of the effect of the original burst heal. But Echo of Heaven is the exact talent that makes your healing tier 1 status. Level 10, you want to go Divine Palm as a way to keep your teammates from dying. It brings them back at a very, very, very respectable amount of health. Level 13, again, this is open for interpretation, but for my build, you want to go Relentless so that Anybody that tries to cast any crowd control on you, any CC effects are cut in half, so you have that much more of an opening to continue to do your job. But again, if you want to add even more movement speed options, Quicksilver is definitely a viable talent. If you feel comfortable going that way, go that way. But for my build personally, I go Relentless. Level 16, this is where you add even more viability to your W ability with Soothing Breeze. This basically acts as a cleanse. It removes silences, blind slows, and roots. This just puts your healing that much further over the top. And finally, at level 20, you want to go Peaceful Repose so that you don't have to. It takes all of the pressure, or almost all of the pressure, off of trying to time your Divine Palms the correct way. This gives you a lot more leeway with players that don't notice it and don't exactly play as aggressive as they should when they have the palm on them. So again, this is the first half of the build video. Second half of the build video, we'll be showcasing this build in its entirety. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you just watched the first half, come back for the second half, see how it works. As always, I appreciate the support. This is Achilles LBT. That's Achilles with the Z. Remember it.